everyone gets wet. At 9 Lowen Y. Grant Place, where the Penellan winds blow, lived a family of 5 with a garden to grow. The morning was humid, a bourda to all, as the sun began climbing the Cardiff stone wall. Gareth and Carys, both Chinese and Welsh, found the heat of the summer quite difficult to squelch. "Ni hao," said Carys. "The flowers are dry. They're the apple of my eye, yet they wither and sigh." Gareth nodded. "Hi, Fred. The weather is sweet, but the garden is parched from this relentless heat." They stood on the patio, a picture of grace, in their vibrant and bustling Penellan place. Then came the twins, who were 7 years old, with spirits quite fiery and stories untold. Seren, in pink, was a vision of bright, while Emrys, in blue, was a shimmering sight. They were ecstatic and loquacious, full of ni hao and glee as they skipped round the lawn for the whole world to see. "Mama, Baba, can we play in the sun? To stay inside now would be abysmal, no fun." They bickered a little, a sibling-like clash, about who would be first to make a big splash. But wait, don't forget little Ellis, aged 4, who brought green-colored chaos through the back door. To Gareth, this boy was a treasure, a prize, though a devious glint often danced in his eyes. "Bourda, Baba," Ellis cried with a grin, his green shirt reflecting the mischief within. Gareth hugged his small son, his steadfast young man, oblivious quite to the boy's secret plan. The atmosphere shifted, the calm before the storm, as the garden grew heavy, humid, and warm. Gareth approached the water butt, tall and quite green, the most notorious eyesore that Penellan had seen. "Alas," he exclaimed, "it's a dire circumstance. The bottom is leaking. We've no time to dance." The water was weeping, a sad, steady drip, like a slow-sinking feeling on a doomed, tattered ship. Carys checked the hose, which was coiled like a snake, and found a small hole that was clearly a mistake. "To make matters worse," she remarked with dismay, "this hose is redundant. It's a dark, dreary day." Gareth was adamant he could rectify the fault, for his DIY skills were worth more than their salt. He grabbed a thick patch and some industrial glue, while Emrys stood by, as his helper so true. "It's a piece of cake, Emrys. Just watch and you'll see. I'll fix this old butt for your mama and me." But the bricks underneath were erratic and old, and the butt was quite heavy, or so he'd been told. It was a precarious perch, a rudimentary stand, for a job that required a most exemplary hand. While Gareth was busy, Carys sought to prolong the life of the hose, though the timing was wrong. Seren brought tape, pink and sticky and bright, to help her dear mama win this watery fight. "Diolch, my darling," Carys said with a smile. "We'll have this hose working in just a short while." But the hose was an old, derelict, tattered thing, prone to a snap and a sudden, sharp sting. They worked against the clock, on pins and needles indeed, to provide the parched garden the water it'd need. Back at the butt, Gareth's patch was now set, but he hadn't quite factored in getting so wet. The pressure was building, a relentless force, as the water looked for a new, violent course. Suddenly, crack! Like a cacophonous boom, the butt split apart, sealing Gareth's dark doom. The patch didn't hold. It was futile and weak, and the water erupted in a silver-slick streak. Gareth was drenched from his head to his toes, as the water butt's anger continued to pose. "Livid," he shouted, "I'm incensed and cold," as the water butt's story was tragically told. He looked like a fish out of water, bereft, with only his pride and a wet puddle left. The irony hit him. He'd tried to stay dry, but the heavens had opened without even a sky. It was mortifying, a most appalling sight, to be soaked by a butt in the broad morning light. "To put it mildly," he muttered with chagrin, I think I'll go change and then start once again. Carys, meanwhile, was at the brink of success, or so she believed in her watery guess. She'd patched up the hose with a steadfast resolve, thinking there wasn't a leak she couldn't solve. But the tap was quite old, a malfunctioning part that was ready to break Carys's poor, hopeful heart. It hummed and it hissed with a sibilant sound, while Carys knelt down on the hard, stony ground. She reached for the nozzle, her hand slightly wary, for the pressure inside was becoming quite scary. Pop went the tap top, a sudden explosion caused by the water's internal erosion. It flew through the air like a bird on the wing, a most unexpected and treacherous thing. A geyser erupted, a fountain of might, drenching poor Carys in the shimmering light. "Diolch for nothing," she cried in dismay, as her exemplary patch was all washed away. She was crestfallen, soaked, and at rock bottom too, wondering just what a mother should do. Gareth returned, now in clothes that were dry, with a brand new water butt and a glint in his eye. "Don't be discouraged," he told Emrys with pride. "We'll set up this butt with no leakage inside." He'd bought a new model, out of this world and grand, the finest new vessel in all of the land. But he used the old bricks, which were still quite erratic, a decision that wasn't particularly pragmatic. Emrys helped Baba to lift it in place, a look of great focus on each of their faces. To fill up the butt, they used the old hose, which Carys had fixed, or so they suppose. Gareth stood close as the water began to flow into the butt, a most marvelous plan. But the bricks were unstable, a precarious base, and the butt started tilting at a terrifying pace. Gareth tried to obstruct its inevitable fall, but he was too small, and the butt was too tall. "Look out!" yelled Emrys, his voice full of fear, as the ultimate disaster drew suddenly near. Thud went the butt as it crashed to the floor, spilling more water than ever before. Gareth was flattened, a most pitiful sight, as the water engulfed him with all of its might. He was back to square one, his efforts thwarted again, a man quite defeated by gravity's reign. "It is what it is," he sighed from the ground, as the echoes of Bedlam continued to sound. He was drenched once again, a repetitive fate, which he found quite impossible to tolerate. Carys, undeterred, had bought a new hose to eliminate leaks in her watery woes. It was long and quite yellow, a vibrant display, to ensure that the garden was watered today. She joined it to the old one, a risky adaptation, to reach the far beds of the Welsh vegetation. Saren was helpful, a loyal young girl, as the yellow hose started to twist and to curl. "This is indispensable," Carys declared, "a tool for which Gareth and I are prepared." They laid out the line with a delicate touch, making sure that they didn't overstretch it too much. "It's a blessing in disguise," Carys said to her daughter, "that we finally have such a source for our water." The hose snaked along through the grass and the flowers, promising Carys some gardening powers. But unbeknownst to the pair as they worked on their task, little Ellis had something he wanted to ask, or rather, a deed he was prone to perform, to stir up a sudden and watery storm. Ellis was hidden behind the brick wall, feeling quite cheeky and not at all tall. He saw the brass tap, which Gareth had mended, and thought that the silence should really be ended. With a devious grin and a hand on the dial, he waited and watched for a very long while. Then, twist, went the handle as far as it goes, sending a surge through the long yellow hose. Carys was holding the join in her hand, when the pressure became more than the plastic could stand. The join snapped apart with a loud, sudden crack, and the hose whipped around like a snake on the attack. Carys was hit by a spray so intense it defied every logic and all common sense. She was livid, infuriated, soaked to the bone, standing there dripping and feeling alone. "Ellis," she shouted, "you've made a great mess." But the boy only giggled at her watery distress. It was the last straw, the penultimate blow, in this garden where only the water would grow. The children, however, were not at all sad. In fact, the pandemonium made them quite glad. The paddling pool, Saren cried with a shout. It's time that we brought the big blue one out. Emrys agreed. It's a brilliant idea. To stay dry in this heat is a genuine fear. They dragged out the pool, which was dusty and dry, under the heat of the afternoon sky. We'll fill it up fast. It'll be such a treat, the ultimate way to escape from the heat. Saren took charge of the hose and its flow, while Emrys got ready to jump in and go. But Gareth, who wanted to help them succeed, had taken an action that nobody'd need. He'd accidentally stepped on a part of the line, thinking a knot would make everything fine. Or perhaps it was sabotage, a devious play to get back at the children for his watery day. He'd looped it and tied it in a rudimentary knot, which was now getting dangerously, incredibly taut. The hose began swelling, a strange phenomenon, as the water's momentum continued to run. It looked like a sausage, or a long yellow balloon, under the heat of the Penellan noon. Gareth and Karis stood back from the sight, as the hose grew more bulbous with all of its might. Something is wrong, Gareth said with a smirk. I don't think this hose is beginning to work. The pressure was rising, reaching the brink, faster than anyone really could blink. Kaboom! Went the hose in a final explosion, a victim of pressure and plastic erosion. A wall of bright water erupted in air, soaking the children who were standing right there. Saren and Emrys were caught in the spray, the highlight of their very wet Cardiff day. They were laughing and screaming, devoid of all care, with water and joy flying everywhere. It's raining cats and dogs! Saren cried with a grin, as the real fun of summer was about to begin. But the spray didn't stop with the twins on the lawn. It reached Gareth and Karis, who both looked forlorn. The wind caught the water and carried it wide, leaving no place for the parents to hide. They were soaked for the third time, a hat trick of wet, the most tattered and bedraggled they'd been, I would bet. Add insult to injury, Karis exclaimed, while Gareth looked down, feeling slightly ashamed. We're all in the same boat, he said with a sigh, completely submerged, though the sun's in the sky. They stood in the garden at 9 Lowen Y Grant, a scene that a painter would certainly want. A family of 5, all dripping and dazed, while the sun in the heavens continued to blaze. The Borda had turned into a hyfrid afternoon, even if things had gone pear-shaped so soon. They looked at each other and started to roar, laughing much louder than ever before. The anger had vanished, the tension was gone, as the spirit of Cardiff continued to shine on. Alas, Gareth said, it's a blessing in disguise, a taste of our medicine, a watery prize. Saren and Emrys jumped into the pool, which was finally filled and delightfully cool. Ellis joined in with a ni hao and a splash, ending the day with a green-colored dash. Everyone got wet, as the story had said, before it was time to go climbing to bed. Diolch, said Karis, for a day out of this world, as the flags of their summer were finally unfurled.